I'm really glad we're doing this together. And how did I become initiated? Uh, I come from a upper middle class family in a provincial town in Spain, absolutely foreign to flamenco. Flamenco had scarcely even, had never been played at home. I was just a normal kid, a 15, 16-year-old kid who liked international pop music, like everyone I knew. And but my parents got separated. They got divorced, and we had a very close. There was a family who were really close friends with us, and the head, the father of this family, was a very dear friend. He was a man whom I admired a great deal. He was like a second father figure to me, and he used to talk a lot about flamenco, and I knew he liked flamenco a great deal. So in my mind, if Fidel, if this man is so interested in flamenco, there has to be something there. That's what I thought. So he let me borrow one of his treasured recordings. It was a record by a singer from Jerez de la Frontera, Terremoto de Jerez. And this was hardcore flamenco. No, how would I put it? It's really traditional, very sober, very very hardcore flamenco. Let's keep it at that. And I started listening to that record all the time. I at first I didn't understand it a great deal. There was something about what I was in the music I heard and the palmas, the rhythm, that I liked, and I liked the voice, but I didn't understand a word. I was new to the language and didn't make much sense to me. But I listened to this recording all day long, over and over and over, even while I slept, because I went to bed with those old auto reverse little Walkmans and played that until I ran out of battery. So that record kept going on and going on while I was sleeping, and suddenly I was crazy about flamenco. I just became, crazed about it. And there was a guitar at home. I had somehow managed through friends to learn a few basic chords. Sorry about that. And so I could play a few basic chords in guitar. And by listening to the record, I started also trying to catch everything that they broadcasted in national TV, any flamenco show that they broadcasted, and so I began starting just by myself, using my ear and using the videos. And when I realized it, I was completely crazy about flamenco. I couldn't manage to do much more every day. I became an alien because no one I knew, certainly none of my friends could understand what I was talking about when I talked about flamenco. My little brothers ran away from me when I tried to chase them with my guitar. Listen to this. Listen. Everybody ran away from me. I became a total alien, in my family and in my background, in my setting, in my social setting. And I took to the streets because I knew there were gypsies in Salamanca, and I decided I had to meet them, and see what flamenco was all about, because for a long time I was, I was living with this passion and this this infatuation just by myself at home. And at first it was all recordings and media that I could find, in TV, newspapers, anything that could fall into my hands. But very soon I took to the streets, and the main source became, I don't know, what I could get from my intercourse with the people who did flamenco in Salamanca, which was 90% gypsies and a few non-gypsy people who also played the guitar. And suddenly I could learn by watching them, and sometimes you got a little falseta. Of course, that search took me to a walk in the wild side of Salamanca, to the complete horror of my parents, especially my mother, and of course that meant for me a total, how would I put it, a social journey within my hometown. I got to know places and people and backgrounds that I didn't even know they were there. I guess it changed it a great deal. For starters, I had to learn the trade, the job, and I had to learn a professional perspective, a viewpoint of the matter. Also, and I'm talking specifically about flamenco dance and the job, the job of a guitarist who plays for dance and for dance companies, which is a totally different world. Flamenco guitar players usually specialize in either of three areas. They can focus on playing for dance, lo que llaman tocar para bailar, or they specialize in accompanying singers, or they focus their careers on solo playing, as it were. And that would be, I guess, similar to a classical musician. They have a repertoire, and they present, they fight for that. They defend that repertoire on stage, and that's what they do. So I traveled, and I became a professional working for dance, for the dancers, and that is probably the most interesting area for a flamenco guitar player, because that puts you in contact with many people. Those are the players that travel most, and so I had to learn to play, knowing the perspective of the dancers. Of course, playing for dancers, you also play for singers, so that gives you kind of a global perspective. You have to do three things, and of course you also have to play solos every once in a while, because it's demanded from you. And apart from that, I had to learn the discipline of rehearsing, of I don't know what the word is in English. In Spain we say componer, compose. To make music fast for concrete shows. And the leader of the dance company would tell you, I need a 2-minute introduction to open the show. Here I need this falseta, which is a variation. It's like a guitar solo, interspersed between singing and dancing. We need this structure. We need to, and of course you have to memorize the whole shows. And that is the job. For me, the way I see it, my professional career started when I decided to move to Madrid, to the capital. Of course, since I started playing, I I managed to get into the Salamanca's flamenco scene quite easily because I didn't have too great an ear, but rhythm was kind of easy for me, and flamenco is the most difficult aspect of flamenco is probably the rhythm. So by the time I was almost 30, I had already been playing and earning money in Salamanca, in my hometown. I soon began to be requested to play for this guy. I participated in various groups, various bands, however you want to call it. So I knew the basic styles. I knew the basic rhythms. I had quite a lot of falsetas, which is the weapons. You know, it's your repertoire, really, the repertoire that the guitarist, the flamenco guitarist, has. And the thing was, suddenly I found myself in a situation where I didn't feel challenged enough. I wasn't learning much more in my hometown. I wanted to play for dancing because somehow I knew that was where you could grow as a musician. And took me a long time to make the decision because I was scared. I thought I always thought I had started late, that my technique was not so great. And Madrid, you know, we saw Madrid like this mecca of flamenco and full of wonderful guitar players with incredible technique. So I was already at the point where I thought either I get out of my hometown or I look for a day job, you know, as Americans say.
Right.
And I decided to risk it and took off for Madrid, and I learned the job doing it. I was lucky in those times. There was lots of work for a great demand of flamenco guitar players, and I got lucky. I started working from the word go, and I had the chance to learn the job by doing it.
So
Mainly the dance, flamenco dance, that had somehow captured, earned a market all through the world. At the time I got into the job, there had been a very, very clear impact by three movies done by Carlos Saura with Antonio Gades. Antonio Gades was a very, very important man in Spanish dance through the 70s, 80s. But those three movies, Carmen, Bodas de Sangre, El Amor Brujo, had just been released, and they had created a huge impact all over the world. Prior to that, Gades, with his dance company, with his ballet, had already succeeded in opening up the greatest theaters, the greatest scenes throughout the world. But those three movies became so popular that from there on, there was a legion of people learning to dance flamenco all over the world and suddenly there was a great demand for dance companies, which had flamenco dance companies had been touring the world for ages, for a very long time. But from that moment on, there was like a flamenco craze, and suddenly there was lots of work. And I think it was mainly because of Antonio Gades' work. You know, they call it nacionalismo. You know, like as a classical music current within the classical music, and Spain had become an international musical theme. You know, it's not only Falla, Albeni, Granados, but also Debussy, the Russian composers. They have their Capricho Español. You know, it was already like a musical theme. The main component would be Spanish popular music, for starters. Of course, Spanish popular music is not an isolated thing. Many different cultures have gone through Spain, have established themselves in Spain. So we really don't know in the singing. For instance, the Arabs were there for 8 centuries almost. Of course, when the Arabs were conquered, I can't think of. I'm sorry if I don't find appropriate words, but by that time, I think when the Arabs were conquered, the winners, they say history is written by the winners. I guess they mostly wiped out any trace of Arab influence in the music. But I guess they couldn't wipe it all away. So there must be some Arab influence in the way popular music in Spain, the singer sings. From then on, I think the main ingredients are Spanish popular music, contact with America, because Spain at that time was not only the peninsular reality, but also consisted of huge territories with very different ethnic backgrounds. The Afro-American is also, and as recent day investigators proceed with their findings, it is ever more clear that the Afro influence is very strong also in flamenco, especially in binary rhythms.
Mhm.
And of course there's also the European background, and then I think those are the materials, the main materials, because there's not anything in flamenco musically that is not present in Toccata y Fuga of Sebastian Bach.
Mhm.
Scarcely anything. It's a mix of all those things, and then in comes the Spanish gypsy,
Mhm.
and somehow manages to give it all, to contaminate it all, to put his personality, to bring his personality in flamenco and transform it somehow. The character, you know. But from the start, flamenco was subjected to. There's people who even say that flamenco was a reaction. Popular Spanish music gave birth to a singing and a dancing tradition, but it soon began to be contaminated by French influence in the dancing aspect. All the classical. If you think of classical dance, all the terminology is French. And the or, and the dan, grand jeté, that kind of thing, and by Italian music. We're talking about second half of the 18th century, and this in turn provoked a reaction. No. We need to find our own way of. So I guess in what I'm trying to say is, in flamenco there's always been two tendencies. One, to open it up to a universal dimension, closer to classical music, to a wider spectrum, and a very, very local, concentrated identity, which has been deliberately looked for since the start.
Mm.
Because one of the first we prior to flamenco, we have the escuela bolera. The escuela bolera came as a reaction against those tendencies, those more European refinements of Spanish popular music. Escuela bolera, in turn, soon began to be contaminated, refined a little bit through those influences, European influences. And flamenco, they say, the flamencologists are finding that flamenco came as a second reaction in the 19th century, especially after the French invasion, against that opening up, that refinement of the cultural, of the musical heritage, of the musical patrimonio. So I guess that has that to some extent that is in flamenco's ADN a little bit. It forms part of its intention, of its drive from the word go, I should say, maybe. That could be an explanation. As soon as it starts refining itself too much, there's people who say, no, 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 no. We're driving away from the identity, of flamenco art in the rhythmic aspect, the ternary, I guess you would say in English, 3-time beat, yes, which coincidentally most of Spanish folk music, popular music, is tertiary, all over the Iberian Peninsula. We don't find binary until it comes from the contact with the American colonies, and more specifically from the African component. And then there's a very interesting thing, because I told you there's nothing in flamenco that you cannot find in Bach's Toccata and Fuga. And that is true. Western music has produced two distinct modes, major and minor. And somewhere in the 17th century, I should say 17th, 18th century, the minor mode found that it needed a dominant chord, a stronger dominant chord to resolve, to give attention, to fall onto the minor chord. So they raised that G. if you're in A minor, suddenly you had available a dominant E chord to fall on the A minor. Well, flamenco has produced a different mode.
Okay.
And the thing is, for instance, in Toccata and Fuga, you always found passages in classical pieces that rested on that new dominant and produced an A, G, F, E before falling. And that's before falling, but that was never the final cadence. It was used to give it color, to make a different part, a different motif, a different section of the composition, right? But flamenco decided that was his thing.
Okay, so if I understand,
so flamenco falls on that E7th chord and stays there, and it has made its musical world based on that specific secondary cadence, not the main cadence originally, but it has decided to live there. So it has, by that doing, it has produced a different sound, a different color, a different mode, one would say. You find out in Toccata and Fuga and many classical compositions. It was already there. It was not invented by flamenco players, by flamenco musicians, But maybe the flamenco artist, pre-flamenco artist, found that part of the musical piece more evocative of, because from the word go, flamenco, that national identity, aesthetic identity, looked towards Andalusia, the gypsy, the Arab influence. That was what the pre-flamenco, the proto-flamenco artists found as inspiration, So probably that part of the cadence, that particular cadence, evoked in them that kind of world, that kind of, that world prior to the Christian takeover in Spain,
Right.
That could be the answer. I'm speculating here, but there must be something to it. because of course you can find major mode and minor mode in flamenco, but it's not its main argument. It's always the lighter styles that use them, not so flamenco-ish. They're not so they're not too much. They're not much used by the hardcore flamenco artists. You know, most of flamenco takes place in this particular mode, this flamenco mode. They call it cadencia andaluza, Andalusian cadence, or Doric cadence. I don't know why. Some people call that mode Phrygian mode nowadays, but it's not exactly a Phrygian mode. You know, it's not exactly a Phrygian mode, because it would be a Phrygian with a flat ninth and bemol sostenido 13, bemol 9 sostenido 13 and a sharp 13th. I don't know, something like that. They call it major Phrygian. They call it 2. You know, that dominant chord has produced a whole world of itself,
Right.
and that's where flamenco lives. Is labeled popular. Okay, so I should think that most of it, you know, I had to work a few years ago with a Japanese classical guitar musician, and he invited us over to have dinner to discuss the project and to see what we were going to do. And he produced a little booklet, and it was a cancionero salmantino siglo XVIII. It means it was a compilation of popular songs from Salamanca, my hometown, from the 18th century. And I started going through the book, and I was amazed because I could find lyrics that are still today sung in flamenco in the most various styles. So I guess my guess is maybe I'm, you know, this is something not well known by researchers. I don't know, but my main guess would it would come from Spanish popular music all over Spain. Because, you know, there was a great connection. There's jotas and fandangos that are sung all over Spain, from Asturias, from each region has its fandango, its jotas, but there's songs that you can find being sung and danced in northern Spain, also in southern Spain, in Castilla. So I guess that would be the main, you know, the available body of lyrics, of poetry that the artist that was available to the artists, you know. So I would say that's the main source. And then things that came from America, because there was a huge contamination for many centuries. There was such, you know, many were also written by fellow singers like Pepe de Lucia, Paco de Lucia's little brother. There has always been in flamenco, but this is a very recent phenomenon, you know. For the most part, you know, a flamenco singer uses traditional material, unless he's bringing forth a new recording and he wants to put something fresh. But that is always, and of course there have been many singers, even so traditional singers as Antonio Chocolate, who sung their own lyrics, composed many lyrics to perform. It's not so easy for that to work. No. Well, I don't know. I guess it has much to do with the gypsies and the way they are, you know. There's something, a very old concept in Spanish culture that in Goya's time, it was los majos, Today in Spain we would say chulería. In Cuba they say guapería.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit. It's they're talking about the same thing. It's like a certain defiance in attitude, a certain matter-of-fact way. It also has to do with a closed group. You know, it's very hard to define. It's very hard to define, and flamenco has always, you know, been reduced. The most authentic flamenco has always been situated in the lower strata of society, you know, and so there's an atmosphere where alcohol and is greatly admired, but knowing how to carry your alcohol, you know, it's a combination. It's a weird thing. It's sometimes you would find people from an outside viewer would find a little bit of a Sicilian, you know, mafia type atmosphere about the whole thing, because it's a closed, you know, it's a closed group thing with its rituals, with very machoist, as a matter of fact, not in the profession, but in the way the flamenco is expected to behave a little bit. This is very, for me, this is very hard to define. But when you see it, you recognize what that flamenco atmosphere is like. Very, very fast, very, very fast. It's difficult to describe it, though. Not show weakness and speed, velocity of mind, and wit, and knowing how to behave in situations where there's Terremoto de Jerez, because he's the first singer that blew my mind, you know, completely. And then I would have to say Paco de Lucía and Camarón de la Isla, Manolo Caracol, Melchor de Marchena, that we just saw playing for Dolores Vargas, and Angelita Vargas, a wonderful gypsy dancer from Sevilla. There's many, many loved ones, many people who in Spain for since a very long time ago. Maybe it's the afrancesados, maybe since the 18th century, where the more culture, the Spanish elite, I don't know how, elite, became concerned or interested in taking Spain a little bit more in an European path, in a French path, thinking that we were too heavily influenced by the Catholic Church, and too traditional and too backwards as if compared to Europe. Since that time, I think there has evolved a certain kind of middle class, of bourgeoisie. I don't know how you say it, sorry.
Yeah.
In Spain, in una burguesía in Spain that has felt a little, you could say a little horror, you know,
Apprehensive.
A little disgusted by its own popular classes. Let's put it that way. And this pack would include bullfighting, these crazy traditions that seem to exist in Spain. Of course, flamenco, and I think that still happens today. That was very noticeable in the Generación del 98. In fact, it was Lorca and Falla who maybe that was quite exceptional for so important intellectuals to make a public defense of flamenco, you know. Because there's and in, of course, this is my own personal view, but in Spain, la riqueza, how would you say that? It's not only money, but money has been concentrated mainly in Madrid, Catalonia, and El País Vasco. Those were the places where the concentration of capital took place in Spain, and so and therefore also this is parts of the country where people are more cultivated, more European-like, if you want to, if you may. And probably this happens more in those kinds of places, you know. And also northern Spain in general sees this. It's kind of far away from this flamenco world, southern flamenco world, close to Africa, close to the gypsy, the Moor. It's kind of foreign for people maybe coming from northern Spain. So there's a little bit of all that. If know if we can blame Franco for that, because because the thing is, you know, it's for whatever reasons, flamenco has transcended its folkloric origins, you know, and it has a huge. It had a huge appeal. It has a wider appeal. I don't know if you could do with flamenco what was done with flamenco and such its important role in the media. Could you have done that with regional, for instance, as we say in Spain, with regional dances? And probably not.
Right.
You know, there was not much more that could, you know, that could arouse the interest of the audience everywhere. I remember my mother, she's from Asturias, she's very north, up in the north of Spain, in the mountains, a very, very isolated place. And my mother grew up singing flamenco informed popular music, and that was the thing. It was what everybody liked. It was not something that of course, people say in those times that was the only thing that was played in the radio. But I don't know. I think you can own a car, you can own a house. I'll concede that. Let's believe in private property, you know. But I'm not sure if you can own a culture or you can own a music. I find that sounds a bit, you know, overstretching the concept of private property for me. I can't follow there. So in that sense, I think artists are absolutely entitled to do whatever they feel, because of course they are placing themselves in the public eye and they open themselves up for criticism. Rosalia is being very successful with her career, but she knows perfectly well that she does not get any respect from flamenco people. She knows that all too well, because and that's the second part of the conversation. I concede she has absolutely every right to do whatever she pleases, you know. But the dark side, the other aspect of the same issue is that, as a Cuban said, as a Cuban friend once told me, bolero you cannot interpret. And I didn't quite understand, but I think what he meant is you cannot fake bolero. You have to be a specific kind of person. You have to be a bolero person to sing bolero. You cannot sing bolero for fun after you, while at the same time you're singing, you know, whatever, you know. You have to be you have to have a specific kind of background, to be a specific type of person to have, in order to sing bolero. And I think the same applies to flamenco. You know, there's many people everywhere that try their hand at flamenco, be it singing, dancing, guitar playing. Well, of course, everybody's free to do so. But the truly difficult thing in this business, in this art, is to merit, to get the respect from the people, from the flamenco lovers, from the artists themselves. And these artists that you're talking about, they are very, I think they're very much aware that they don't have that.
Yeah.
You know, it's different because flamenco is very, that it has such a local component, you know, although it has a universal appeal, but it has such a strong local component, so specific, you know, that I've heard Rosalia doing some freestyles, some not so very hardcore flamenco styles like milonga, vidalita mitai, Japanese slipped, vidalita, these kind of styles that are more not so rhythmical, not so, and she sounded interesting enough, you know, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen her trying to improvise some bulerías in a YouTube video at Tablao, Flamenco El Cordobés in Barcelona.
Right.
And it sounds like, it looks like a fake, like an imitation of flamenco. Pop music has a more definite structure, form, as they say, musical form. You will have a part, B part, and a chorus, a C part, and that's it. And they are recurrent. They happen twice, three times, and then the song is over. You know, whereas flamenco doesn't have a definite form. You know, a singer and of course, if it's dance, it will be pre-decided. You know, we will decide a structure, and that's what we will do. But there's no repetition. How would I say? There's no. It's a totally different concept. That for starters, you know, and then I don't know. It's difficult. And since I'm a musician, for me, I think I would think it always in terms of music. So it's a different setting, but I guess I would approach it in a. But the thing is, flamenco it doesn't need to be understandable for a larger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't need to worry to be intelligible for larger audience, for non-initiated audiences. Whereas pop is the total opposite. Its goal is to be able to be easily identified and understood and interiorized by any type of audience. I guess that would be the main thing. And there's also another aspect. Pop you can use as background music to some extent. You can dance to it, and you can also you can also use it as a background music while you have a conversation with friends, etc., etc. I have a friend from Barcelona. Chai, he's a musician living in Singapore. He doesn't play flamenco, but he likes flamenco and he's interested and he learns a little bit. And he says that the problem with flamenco is you cannot use it as a background music. You have to listen to it. Right. I am still being able to do some live shows through streaming, but there's no audience. There's no live audience, you know, and you miss everything. For the audience too, if you see a flamenco show through internet, when you see it recorded, it has nothing to do with the experience of watching it live. And I know it firsthand. I remember when I was a teenager and I went to Madrid the first few times, and I managed to get inside of flamenco tablao, and it was even scary, you know, when the dancers came on stage with their attitudes and the whole atmosphere of the place. It was magic. I was fascinated. I didn't blink for the 2 hours of the show. It was something crazy. But if you were to see that same show in a video, I don't know, but much gets lost. Much of the. So that's something I always say, that I have had this conversation with friends. I'm not too. I'm not too interested in flamenco, especially the dance. I don't like it too much and whatever. Have you ever seen it live? And do see it live, because so I guess this takes out everything out of the heart of the heart of the artists, not being able to come in contact with the audience. I'm still getting the chance to do some shows every once in a while. We don't have an audience, but I have my companions, my friend artists, and to a degree, we also do it for the sake of each other's appreciation. When I go on stage, it's not the audience that scares me most. What I want to play good for the sake of of my buddies, of the dancers, or to deserve to earn their respect. That's a little bit of my thing. But of course, everything, and I'm really, from the artist's point of view, I've gotten used to not there being a live audience. It's weird, but it is so, because I've been doing stream shows on streaming for almost, I don't know, a whole year. No, it can't not be a whole year, but a long time already. And somehow I've managed to get used to it, but it's not the same thing. Not the same thing at all. Especially in flamenco, where the audience, that is also the audience gives you feedback. They say ole, especially in Spain. In Spain, the audience can get really noisy and display their love for what you're doing, or the absolute loathing of what you're doing. You can see some really funny scenes in flamenco shows